There are lots of people pretending like Pride doesn't exist this year, but we're not doing that over here. It's actually kind of weird of you. So I'm going to tell you the 5 books that you have to read for Pride. That way, when they ask you how you celebrated, you won't be embarrassed because you didn't do anything. Instead, you're going to say, I read about everybody gay. Because that's the thing. Everybody is gay. I'm Amanda, and this is Most Bookish. First book that we're going to talk about is Loca by Alejandro Heredia, because Latinos are gay. This is a Dominican immigrant story set in the 90s. Our protagonists are Sal and Charo, and there's a lot of conversation around what it means to escape and how the ideal of opportunity is not often the reality. Sal in particular grew up experiencing violence and around his gayness and around the queer people in his life. And while he didn't originally intend to escape, the open homophobia on the island ended up resulting in a loss that he could not handle. And he just had to get out of there. And coming to New York, he doesn't experience the same kind of open violence, at least not by the 1990s. But there is still the fear of loss of life with the AIDS epidemic, loss of employment because of discrimination. And there are stories in the neighborhood of violence done not that long before he's living there. It's a really great book about finding a place for yourself, finding a way forward, even when you're stuck in this in-between. And sometimes you have to go back because you realize that you can't let go of every piece of yourself, even if you wanted to. The next book you have to read is Fun Home by Alison Bechdel, and I have talked about this book in other videos because it's just fantastic. It's fantastic for Pride Month, and it's fantastic all year round. And you should read it because families are gay. The idea that more than one queer person in a family is weird is very 1987 vibes, and we don't like it. The story is a tragicomic. Alison actually illustrates the entire story herself. It's an amazing book. She actually has multiple books that she does illustrations for like this. And it's her journey from being a daughter struggling with revealing her queerness to her family when just after she does so, her father dies in a car accident. And then she finds out from her mother that her father has had affairs over the years with men. It's her journey of wading through her own secrets, her family secrets, her father's secrets. Did she know him? What version of him belonged to her? What version of him was real? What version of herself is real? And figuring out what cost these secrets come at that all of them are keeping, that everybody keeps. And honestly, you can take it as a larger commentary on society, right? Like, at what cost are we keeping these secrets? At what cost are we pretending like families aren't all things? And how much more free would we be if we acknowledge that? Our third book is about James Baldwin, because Black people are gay. This is not by James Baldwin. It's I Am Not Your Negro, put together by Raoul Peck. And it's a companion to a film that he made. The entire story is made up of Baldwin's writing and historical things that were going on while he was writing. It's interviews that he had, it's non-published works of his and some published works, and it's part of the final book that Baldwin was writing. There's a lot of conversation on the book internet about what an amazing writer Baldwin was, and that's obvious. And there are a lot of clips of him giving interviews about really important messages around what it is to be a Black man in this country, but so much of what he says feels so contemporary that you forget what time period he was living through. He was older than Malcolm. He was older. Yeah, he was. He was older than Malcolm. He was older than Martin. This is a book where he was going to examine 3 pivotal figures that he had relationships with who were all murdered. Malcolm, Martin, and Medgar Evers, who was an activist for the NAACP. They were all murdered before they were 40 and murdered for what Baldwin had spent much of his career doing, which was talking about what it meant to be Black in America. And there's a lot of what he talks about that obviously applies to the experience of queer people in this country as well. There's an interview that he had, I marked like almost this entire book. It is tiny. I read it in one day. It's like 100 pages. And it applies so much this year where it feels like we're pretending like Pride doesn't exist. And what he was saying is basically that the country had made no space for Black people to exist in it. And it's the same right now for the LGBTQ plus community. Leaving aside all the physical facts, which one can quote, leaving aside the bloody catalog of oppression, which we are in one way too familiar with already, What this does to the subjugated is to destroy his sense of reality. This means in the case of the American Negro, born in that glittering republic, and in the moment you are born, since you don't know any better, every stick and stone and every face is white. And since you have not yet seen a mirror, you suppose that you are too. It comes as a great shock around the age of 5 or 6 or 7 to discover that Gary Cooper killing off the Indians when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you. It comes as a great shock to discover the country which is your birthplace and to which you owe your life and your identity has not in its whole system of reality evolved any place for you. That's the way that man would talk. Ugh. If you haven't read him, read him, but if you can listen to him speak, do so. Oh. This one. History is not the past, it is the present. We carry our history with us. We are our history. If we pretend otherwise, we literally are criminals. I attest to this. The world is not white. It never was white. Cannot be white. White is a metaphor for power, and that is simply a way of describing Chase Manhattan Bank. Read this. Hijab Butch Blues, written under a pseudonym Lamia H, is a story of a young queer Muslim girl trying to figure out why she does not fit in this idea laid out for her of what her life should be in the country that she comes from. All the representations of options for women around her and their positionalities socially are not anything that she wants for herself. And so when she comes to New York to study, she eventually goes on this journey to find this middle space between preserving her faith, because Muslims are gay, and building a queer identity that feels authentic to her. And much like Loca, this is not a story of her coming here and finding all of the answers or finding all of the freedom that she was looking for. She actually comes here and has more questions than less. There's communities that she stumbles into thinking she might belong into them, but they don't necessarily align with her faith. There's communities that she stumbles into that don't align with her politic. It's the truth of intersectionality needing to exist because we are never one thing, and only by finding our place amidst all of the things that make us up are we able to live closer to peace with ourselves, or at least maybe be more forgiving of our imperfections. By the end of the story, this runs into her young adulthood. By the end of the story, she still hasn't come out to large parts of her family back home. She doesn't want who she is to be known publicly, but she knows that telling her story is important. There's so much about faith in here that I love. There's so much about being young and confused that I love. It's just such a really great book. And last, and probably most obviously, right? White men are gay. You knew that, right? David Sedaris. This one is the best of me. It is one of his more experimental ones. The thing with David Sedaris, he is a memoirist. He has been writing for many decades, and he tends to have a running commentary on the ridiculousness of the world around him and the ridiculousness of his inner thoughts. And you kind of go back and forth, sometimes wondering if the story is real or not, or if he's even talking about himself, because he makes up these stories and sometimes they're dreams or like imaginings of his. Regardless, they are all funny. You could spend the next 10 years reading all of his writing. He has written so much. He also writes for The New Yorker. He goes on tour, I think every year. I'm going to go see him for the 3rd time. If you are going to love a white gay man, this is the white gay man you should love. That's it, book friends. Did you subscribe? Because we're at the end. And if we went this whole time and you didn't subscribe, then I feel like you don't want to be my friend. And that makes me sad. Read one of these books. So the next time someone you know says that they don't celebrate Pride because they don't know any gay people, you can recommend them one of these books and remind them that everybody's gay. My next video is going to be a Barnes & Noble haul because my local Barnes & Noble closed. And I was very sad. But they had an Everything Must Go sale, and I bought things. And I actually bought another Alison Bechdel book. So tune in. Come back. Tune in. Come back. Because we'll be here. Bye, book friends.